In 1959, 9 experienced hikers headed into the Ural Mountains of Russia. They were young, fit, and masters of the wilderness. Weeks later, they were found dead. Some were half naked in sub-zero temperatures. Some had their skulls crushed with no external bruising. One was missing a tongue. All of them had fled their tent in such a panic that they cut their way out from the inside. This is the story of what happened on Kholat Syakhl, the mountain the locals call the Mountain of the Dead. Part 1. The Expedition. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old radio engineering student who was wise beyond his years when it came to the mountains. He had assembled a team of 8 others, students and graduates of the Ural Polytechnical Institute. They were all grade 2 hikers, meaning they were experts in cold weather survival. They were happy. In the photos recovered from their cameras later, they are seen laughing, hugging, and posing in the snow. They were on an adventure. Their goal was to reach Mount Otorten, a peak about 6 miles north of where their journey would end in tragedy. On January 31st, the group reached the edge of a highland area and began to cache supplies for their return trip. On February 1st, they began to move through the pass. The weather was worsening. Blizzards swept across the slopes, reducing visibility to near zero. By some error, perhaps due to the blinding snow, they drifted west toward the slope of Kholat Syakhl. Realizing their mistake, Dyatlov decided to set up camp right there on the exposed, frozen slope of the mountain, rather than descending into a nearby forest for cover. He didn't want to lose the altitude they had gained. They pitched their tent, ate a meal of loin and crackers at around 8 p.m., and settled in for the night. They had no idea that for 9 of them, the sun would never rise again. Part 2. The Silence. Dyatlov had promised to send a telegram to their sports club as soon as they returned to the village of Vizhai, no later than February 12th. February 12th came and went. Silence. The families weren't worried at first. Delays in the Urals were common, but by February 20, the silence had become deafening. A rescue party of teachers and students was sent out, followed soon after by the military and police with planes and helicopters. On February 26th, the searchers found the camp. What they saw defied all logic. The tent was still standing, but it was half collapsed and covered in snow. When the rescuers moved closer, they realized the tent had been sliced open from the inside with a knife. All of the group's belongings, their warm coats, their sturdy boots, their food, and their maps were still inside. Leading away from the tent was a trail of footprints. 8 or 9 sets of prints made by people wearing only socks, or a single boot, or even barefoot. In -30-degree weather, 9 experts had fled their only source of shelter, leaving behind their shoes and clothes, and walked toward their deaths. Part 3. The First Bodies. The searchers followed the footprints down the slope toward the edge of the forest, about a mile away. Under a giant cedar tree, they found the remains of a small fire. And then they found the first 2 bodies, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonisenchenko. They were dressed only in their underwear. Their hands were burned, as if they had desperately thrust them into the fire to feel anything at all. The bark of the cedar tree was torn off up to 5 meters high, as if they had tried to climb it in a frenzy, perhaps to see if something was following them, or to look back at the tent they were too afraid to return to. Between the cedar and the tent, the searchers found 3 more bodies, Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin. Their positions suggested they were crawling back toward the tent in a desperate attempt to survive. But where were the other 4? Part 4. The Hidden Horror. It took 2 months for the snow to melt enough to find the rest of the group. They were found 75 meters further into the woods, buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine. This is where the story turns from a survival tragedy into a horror movie. Unlike the first 5, these 4 had horrific internal injuries. Nikolai Thibault's Brignoles had his skull completely fractured. Semyon Zolotarov and Ludmila Dubinina had major chest fractures, the kind of damage you would see from a high-speed car accident. But here was the catch. There were no external bruises. It was as if their bodies had been subjected to an immense, crushing pressure that broke their bones without breaking their skin. Even more disturbing, Dubinina was missing her tongue, her eyes, and a part of her lips. Zolotarov was missing his eyeballs. And finally, when the bodies were tested, their clothing showed strangely high levels of radiation. Part 5. The Theories. The Soviet government quickly closed the case. The official verdict was that the hikers had died due to a compelling unknown force. The files were sent to a secret archive, and the area was closed off for years. This, of course, led to decades of theories. The Yeti Theory. Local Wansee tribesmen tell legends of the mink, forest giants that guard the mountains. Some believe the hikers were attacked by something not human, explaining the crushing injuries and the missing tongue. The Military Theory. Some believe the group wandered into a secret weapons testing range. Strange orange spheres were reported in the sky by other hikers in the area that night. Did a parachute mine or a sonic weapon go off above them, causing the panic and the internal damage? The Infrasound Theory. Scientists have proposed that the wind blowing over the dome of the mountain created infrasound, a low-frequency sound that can't be heard, but causes intense physical panic, nausea, and dread in humans. This would explain why they cut their way out of the tent in a madness and fled into the dark. The paradoxical undressing. When the body reaches the final stages of hypothermia, the brain malfunctions, making the victim feel like they are burning up. They strip off their clothes right before they freeze to death. This explains the underwear, but it doesn't explain why they left the tent in the first place. Part 6. The Final Thought. In 2020, a new Russian investigation concluded that a small slab avalanche occurred. A small, heavy block of snow slid down onto the tent, injuring those inside and forcing them to flee. But skeptics point out that the slope was too shallow for an avalanche, and it doesn't explain the radiation, or the missing tongue, or why 9 experts didn't just dig the tent out. Whatever happened on Kholat Syakhl, it remains one of the most terrifying true mysteries in history. 9 people died in a state of absolute terror, fleeing from something they couldn't see, toward a death they couldn't avoid. When you look at the last photo they ever took, a blurry, dark image of a tall figure standing in the snow, you have to ask yourself, did they see the compelling force before it saw them? If these 3 accounts chilled you to the bone, let me know by hitting that like button. It helps keep the shadows at bay. If you haven't already, subscribe and join our growing circle here at Mr. Horrorman. And don't forget to tap that bell icon so you're the first to know when the next nightmare arrives. Tonight's question: which of these 3 stories would be your absolute worst nightmare to experience? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Until next time, keep your doors locked and stay in the light. I'm Mr. Horrorman, and I'll be seeing you soon.